Furthermore, after the liberation of France in 1945, the politically astute de Gaulle led the world to believe that most of his fellow citizens had followed his admonitions to resist passively, and that only a minority of ambitious and venal politicians, with orders from Vichy, had betrayed the values of la France éternelle. This recurrent conceit continues to be manifest. During the 2017 French presidential election, the right-wing Front National candidate, Marine Le Pen, stated baldly, "I don't think France is responsible for the Veldiv. I think that, generally speaking, if there are people responsible, it's those who were in power at the time. It's not France." She was referring to the extensive roundup of Jews in Paris by the French police in July 1942, and their detention in the massive indoor stadium, the Vélodrome d'Hiver. Thousands of them, including many children, would later die in concentration camps. A while later, after the 2017 election, Jean-Luc Mélenchon, the passionate leader of the far left La France Insoumise, unbowed France, agreed with her. To say that France, as a people, as a nation, is responsible for this crime is to agree to a definition of our country which is totally unacceptable. France is none other than its republic. At that time, the Republic had been abolished by the National Revolution of Maréchal Pétain. In that view of history, France, at that period, was in London with General de Gaulle, and wherever French were fighting against the Nazi occupation. I do not intend this book to be a judgment against France for what happened between 1940 and 1945. Those who have not lived through the unpredictable events of a military occupation cannot fundamentally understand them. That is an adage with currency. My story is more focused. How much was the present reputation of the resistance as a courageous force against the temptations of fascism built on the slim shoulders of adolescents, male and female, who often felt that they were standing for something larger even than their patriotic admiration for France? The Germans and French were fighting their third war in less than a century, and in France there was a visceral suspicion, even hatred, of Germans. Prussia had decisively defeated the French military in the Franco-Prussian War, 1870 to 1871, an embarrassment that some great-grandparents could still recall in 1939. And the horrors of the First World War, the Great War, were quite vivid in the collective memory of France. They had marked the youngest generation as well as their elders. News of French casualties of that murderous conflict had been brought home in photographs and newsreels, with the public listings of thousands of names of the wounded, the missing, and the dead, often including their ages. After the war, the shattered bodies roaming the streets and byways of a mourning nation and monuments to the dead in every village kept the memories alive. All of this prevented survivors from ignoring how much promise, innocence, and vigor had disappeared in the space of a few years. And it was taken for granted that young people would not go again sheep-like to slaughter, or at least not without searing justifications. These memories created a major cultural shift in the formal and informal education of youth after 1918. The stories that emerged were doubtless heard with fascinated horror by young people facing another war with their cousins on the other side of the Rhine. And, lest we forget, a significant number of young Frenchmen were held, most for the whole war, in prisoner-of-war camps in Germany. There were those, of course, who resisted in their own way while imprisoned, by planning and effecting escapes, by communicating information to their free brothers and sisters, but effectively the great majority of trained young men were unavailable to the Free French or to the indigenous resistance for almost 5 years. Recent events around the world have reminded us of how fervently youth can latch on to a cause or criticize their elders for creating a chaotic present. With their fervently held beliefs, they regard compromise as a moral failure rather than a strategy. They write their grievances across their culture with billboard-large letters, in songs, in films, on websites, and in literature. We adults muse that, well, when they grow up and see the world as it is, they'll change their tune. That does happen, but for a handful of brief years, they remind us that we might have compromised too much. The association of these assumptions, moral passion and a distrust of authority,